What's up guys? Today's video is for my fellow Ford Ranger and Mazda BT50 owners of a similar era, particularly with the 3-litre turbo diesel Duratorq engine. Mine's due for a service, actually a little bit overdue for a service, which is what tends to happen when you spend every weekend filming YouTube videos. Anyway, over the past year or so, I've received a few requests to start doing basic mechanical videos on these particular engines. So today, I thought I'd run you through the basic service procedure. We're just doing the basics today, nothing too fancy. So if you've never serviced your own car before, or you're just wondering what the service procedure looks like for this particular engine, then this video is for you. Righto, so what exactly are we doing? Today we're going to be changing the engine oil and oil filter, changing the fuel filter, changing the air filter, and also just giving everything a basic once over. So to do this, I've bought 7 litres of Penrite's 5W30 diesel engine oil. It's so cool they now make these in the 7-litre bottles, because I used to have to buy like a 10-litre and always have some left over. The oil capacity, including the filter for these particular engines, is 7 litres exactly, so this should be perfect for the job. Filter-wise, I've bought all Ryco filters. So I've bought their Z418 engine oil filter, I've bought the Z699 fuel filter, and I've bought the A1541 air filter. I swear these things keep going up in price every time I buy one. This cost me close to $70 for an air filter, which is a lot of money, so it better do the job. I'm also going to be replacing the sump plug with this Smart O intelligent sump plug. I may have just been caught by their marketing with their special green extra seal ring. Replacing a sump plug isn't something you have to do every service. I haven't replaced mine for quite a while, so I thought today was the perfect opportunity to do so. But if you're not going to replace the whole sump plug, at least replace the seal. Tool-wise, you'll need a basic socket set to drop the bash plates off, undo the sump plug, and also remove the fuel filter assembly. You may or may not also require some form of oil filter removal tool. Mine are normally hand tight, so I don't normally need to use a tool like this, but it's just good to have on hand just in case. Depending on how nicely the fuel filter assembly wants to play, we may also require a pair of pliers and a pair of multi-grips, but fingers crossed we won't need those. Other than that, all we'll really need is something to catch the oil at the bottom of the engine. So I've just been down to Superjeep Auto and bought myself a brand new catch tray, because the last time I serviced my car, I put the drip tray or catch tray down near the tap where I gave it a clean up and just left it there. Went to get it today, someone's nicked it, so had to go and buy myself a brand new one. Oh, and you'll also need a bunch of rags, like the more rags the better. Now, I do just also want to mention that I have taken the Ranger for a 5-minute drive to warm the engine up a little bit, and the reason I've done that is to decrease the viscosity of the oil, to make it more runny essentially. A good way to think of this is imagine your engine a bit like a jar of honey. If you take the lid off, turn it upside down, you'll be waiting forever for that honey to come out, and even when it does come out, you'll still leave heaps stuck to the inside of the jar. But chuck it in the microwave for a minute, do the same thing, and it's going to pour out like water. So same basic principle, and something that's definitely worth doing. Running the car, not microwaving your honey. Anyway, let's get this service underway. Okay, first thing we need to do is drop the oil, and to access the sump, which is sort of up and around here, we're going to have to drop these 2 bash plates off. And to do so, there's about 6 14mm bolts. There's 3 up the front here. I've only got 2. I'm missing my center one. There's 2 more in the middle that pinch both the bash plates together, and there's 2 more at the very back here. So I'll take those off now. Oh my God, I did those up tight. Do not like the sound of that. Like you sound like you're shearing. And that's what happens when you shear a bolt off. So that one was always a bit dodgy. It had this massive washer because before I owned the car, it looks like it took a bit of a hit under here. So an extra thing I'm gonna have to do is buy a new bolt. It's a bit of a giveaway when you have to bust out the breaker bar to loosen it anyway. So getting that out is gonna be a fun job for later on. I need my rattle gun. Probably should have used that to get the other one out, to be honest. It sounds more violent, but it's actually a gentler way to get the bolt out because there's lots of small little impacts to remove it. So that one came out without too many dramas. Oh, the other one's gonna be fun. Now for this part, we kind of have to support this bash plate while we undo these two bolts. I've still got the front two holding this front section in, but this bash plate is kind of pinched under here. So we'll just loosen these off a little bit, not too much, not fully. And that should allow us to slide this one out the back, like so. Okay, so we've removed those bash plates so we can now access the sump nice and easily. So this is a 19mm bolt, so I've gone ahead and connected my 19mm socket to my breaker bar for a bit of extra leverage. It's a good idea to have a few rags handy because this can be a bit of a messy step in the procedure. And if there's one piece of advice I can give you, it's that the flow of oil is going to go a lot further that way than you're expecting. So I'm going to guess and put my tray about there, see how we go. And now we'll take out that sump plug. If you keep a bit of pressure on it, you can kind of undo it the rest of the way without too much of a leak happening. And then you can just pull it and let it go. Tell you what, it's gonna be one of the best guesses I've had for drip tray positioning. Okay, so while that's emptying out, I'm just gonna crack the oil filler cap at the top, just to allow a bit more flow to go through. Next step is gonna be to remove the oil filter. And it's a bit hard to see, but it's kind of located beyond this air box down underneath the side here. Mine should be hand tight, but if yours is a little bit too hard to get off by hand, I'd recommend one of these oil filter socket adapters that Ryco makes. It literally just kind of clips onto the back of the oil filter, and then you can chuck your breaker bar in the back and crack it off nice and easy. So definitely recommend that if yours is problematic. Now, one of my least favorite parts about DIY servicing is getting oil everywhere. So a method that I worked out a little while ago was to loosen the filter a little bit by hand, then wrap the whole filter assembly in a plastic bag, undo it the rest of the way within the bag, and that way when it comes off, it drops into the bag and all your mess is contained. Anyway, let's get that filter off. Now, I don't like leaving the engine without a filter installed for very long, so I'm going to pop the new one on pretty much straight away. But before I do, I'm going to go get Bianca to explain something that's very important to check for when changing your oil filter, as she's got some first-hand experience. Bianca. Okay, story time with Bianca. So tell us, Bianca, what's the most important thing to check for before you install a new oil filter?
Other than everything Daniel has already mentioned, always check that the little O-ring that seals your oil filter onto your block has come off with your old filter, so that when you put the new one on, you only have one between the oil filter and engine block.
Why do you know that?
I have first-hand experience of what happens when you don't check that. I was doing an oil change on my track car the night before a track day, and long story short, I didn't check my oil filter when I pulled it off, and I even felt, but I just didn't look. So I felt and it felt smooth, so I put the new oil filter on, topped it up with oil, turned my car on, and $120 worth of racing engine oil went on the road.
Great for a happy Bianca, I remember that day very clearly.
I was very angry.
You still sound a bit sour about it.
Anyway, so I freaked out and eventually pulled the new oil filter off and found I had two O-rings sealing it or not sealing it to my engine. So definitely do not recommend. Very dangerous if you actually run your engine without oil. So yeah, double check it.
Yeah, and speaking of, I better go and double check that mine's come off with my old filter.
Highly recommend.
So I can confirm the old seal came off with the old filter, which is good. So the next step is going to be to install this new filter. And before you put the new filter on, it's a good idea to just run a little bit of new oil around the seal. Okay, now it's good to go in. Don't go crazy when you're tightening these, just hand tight is fine. Don't forget to put the sump plug back in. So I'm using my brand new Smart O sump plug and see how it performs. Okay, she's ready for oil to go in. Now this is a 7-litre oil container, and as I mentioned earlier, this has a 7-litre oil capacity including the filter, but that doesn't mean that I'm just going to pour the whole thing in first go. I'll probably start with about 5.5 or 6 litres, then I'll start checking the dipstick to get the level perfect. Okay, that oil level is just below the full mark on the dipstick. So what I'm going to do now is start the car up and let it run for a couple of minutes to A, make sure there's no oil leaks around the filter or the sump plug, and B, that's going to allow oil to fill up that oil filter. And once that's done, I'll check the oil level again, and no doubt it will have dropped a little bit because the oil filter will have consumed some of that oil, and then I'll fill the oil up as required. Next up is the fuel filter, which is this right here. And if all goes to plan, this should be pretty straightforward and simple. Although now that I've said that, it's going to be anything but. But hopefully all we have to do is use a 12mm socket to undo these 2 bolts holding the filter assembly in place. That will allow us to lift it up, tilt it forwards, and unscrew the filter off the bottom. Let's see how we go. You can also disconnect this plug to give you a bit more maneuverability. Okay, once that filter comes free, you can lift it up and that will reveal this plastic connection on the bottom. And on the bottom of that is a little wing nut that you can undo to drain the fuel out of the filter. So I'm just going to do that now to try and make this job as clean as possible, because if we just take the filter off now, diesel's going to go everywhere. We'll probably still spill a little bit, but at least it's going to make it as neat as possible. Do be careful with this little plastic wing nut on the bottom, because obviously being plastic, it is somewhat fragile, so just make sure you don't break it. Okay, now that I've taken that plastic plug out the bottom, I can loosen this filter a bit, which will allow the airflow to enter the filter, and the rest of that diesel should pour out the bottom. Okay, that filter has been removed. It is an option for you to take the fuel lines off and clamp them to reduce the amount of time you have to spend priming it. I've never found it to be too much of a problem for me, so I normally just leave the fuel lines attached, just one less thing to take off and one less thing to go wrong. All right, that filter is now removed, so once it finishes draining its diesel out the bottom into the bag here, I'm going to just remove this plastic piece from the bottom of the filter. Again, it's plastic, so do try and be gentle with it. Fingers crossed, mine will just be hand tight. Yep. And that just unscrews from the bottom of the filter. To install the new one, it's pretty much just the reverse of the removal procedure. So grab it out, take this little piece of plastic off the bottom. That's just keeping this rubber O-ring in place. So make sure you don't lose that ring. And then on the bottom of this little plastic piece here, you'll just want to remove that old seal. Remove that and install the new one. Then take your plastic bung, don't forget to put this back in. Give it a bit of a nip up, but remember it is plastic, so do be gentle. Okay, now remove this bag, give the filter a bit of a wipe over with a rag. And now we're ready to reinstall it. So this is just a matter of lowering it back into that hole, bringing the assembly over the top, and then screw it in place. Nice and tight, but not over the top. Drop it back down onto its mounting pins, and then reinstall those 2 bolts. Okay, that fuel filter's all back installed how it was before. Now we just got to prime the system to get the air out of the fuel lines. Because when we disconnected that filter, these fuel lines that previously had diesel running through them got filled with air. So now we have to press down on this black button on top of the assembly to prime the system. Okay, I think I've pumped that enough. My thumb's telling me I have anyway. So now we're going to start the car and see if it continues running. If I haven't primed it enough, all that's going to happen is the car's going to cut out and then I'll have to get back to priming. I think we've got it. Last but not least, we've got the air filter. This is the easiest job of them all by far, and even if you don't necessarily replace your filter every service, I highly recommend you at least remove it and give it a blowout. And to do so, it's literally just 3 clips on the top of the air box here. 1, 2, and 3. This cable can remain plugged in, but you can just disconnect this little clip on the side, remove it off the side there, and that just gives you a bit more maneuverability. Then it's just a matter of lifting up the lid, kind of pushing it forward enough that you can remove the old filter. Oh, I can already see mine's, it's actually not terrible, but it's pretty clogged up with dirt. So I might be able to get away with just giving that a blowout, but since I've got a new one here ready to go, I may as well pop the new one in and keep this as a spare. There's a few bits and pieces in the bottom of my airbox, so I'm just going to suck them out with this little vacuum cleaner. Okay, that's looking much cleaner in there now. Time to pop the new filter in. My $70 filter. There it is, looking very new and very filter-like. So literally just chuck that back in where the old one came out from. Make sure it's sitting nicely, and then pop this cover back in place. Redo those clips we removed at the start. Pop that cable back in place. And just like that, we are finished with the service. The only other thing I would normally do at this point is just go back through the engine bay and give it a general once over. Check your belts, make sure they're not experiencing any wear and tear. Check all the other fluids, so your brake and clutch fluid, power steering fluid. Check the coolant, and most important of all, top up the windscreen washer fluid. Well, I hope that's shown you just how easy it is to complete a service on your Ranger or BT50. Mine's been in desperate need of that for quite some time, so I'm sure it's going to drive like new after the treatment it's received today. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.